They thought they could write your destiny. They gathered in closed rooms, whispering to each other in confident tones, as if you were just a name they could erase at any time. In the dark, they sharpened invisible blades, made of slander, manipulation, and plans meant to isolate and silence you. They believed that if they moved quietly enough, if they hid carefully enough, you would never notice. But they forgot one thing that arrogant souls always forget. Anything born from darkness must pay its price under the light. You seemed silent, but that silence was what made you far more terrifying to them than any words of defense ever could. They did not only want to hurt you, they wanted to erase you from the picture. They wanted to see you fall, lose your balance, lose your way, and look up begging for mercy. They planted ideas in each other's minds that you were just an obstacle, a rock in the road they wanted to own. They built an entire empire on a foundation of lies, believing that if they repeated them enough times, the lies would become truth. But what they never considered was this. While they were building a castle on sand, you were taking root in stone. You were not born to break. You are the kind of person who bounces back stronger every time life tries to press you down. That is what keeps them awake at night. Because they mistook your patience for weakness. They saw you not reacting, not arguing, not exposing them in front of others, and they thought, it's over, they've given up. But you did not give up. You watched, you waited. You let time do what time does best. You understood that some battles, if entered too soon, would only sink your own feet deeper. Instead of fighting for control, you let them get lost in their own schemes, and the deeper they went, the clearer the evidence became, the more their guilt showed. Psalm 37:13 says, "The Lord laughs at the wicked, for he knows their day is coming." That is not a threat, it is a law. Their day always comes. They just never expect it to come so soon. Picture this. They set traps for you, arranged people and words, built stories to make you fall. But each trap became a fingerprint of betrayal. Each lie they told about you reflected their true nature to the very people they tried to manipulate. They thought they were the hunters, but in truth, they were the prey walking straight into the web they spun. While they were busy performing, you were busy living. While they were busy calculating every step, you were busy standing firm. Divine justice works in the simplest way. Whoever stands on truth will stand firm, and whoever builds on deception will collapse. You do not need to push them. They fall on their own. The bitter truth for them is that the very weapons they sharpened to make you bleed became the ones that tore their masks apart. They planned to use connections to push you out, but those same connections would later ask them, why attack someone who did nothing wrong? They tried to use their tongues to burn your name. But when time passed and you did not fall as they claimed, their words became proof of their lies. They wanted you to kneel, but when you still stood, they had to bow their heads. This is the moment those who rise against the chosen always fear most. When they realize too late that they were never fighting a single person, they were fighting the will of heaven. Have you ever wondered why you never broke, even when they hit your deepest pain? It is not because you are immune to suffering. You hurt, you were abandoned, you cried in silence. But every time it happened, you became heavier in the spiritual world. Your pain did not weaken you, it deepened your foundation. People can only break what is hollow, what has roots. The more it is bent, the stronger it becomes. They forgot that some people are born with an invisible armor, a kind of strength that cannot be measured by achievements, only by how many times they were hit and still stood up. And that person is you. Their downfall began at the exact moment they thought they had won. When they laughed the loudest, the heavens were the quietest. When they showed off their power, invisible chains were already closing around their feet. The walls they built to trap you were closing in on them. The words they spread returned to them, not as echoes, but as judgment. And you, the one once pushed out of the room, now stand at the door watching it all fall apart. With a heart that has matured, you no longer crave revenge, because you understand that God's justice is sharper than any human anger. And this is only the beginning, because when the darkness reveals itself, the light begins to tell the rest of the story. Why you did not fall, why they could never touch what was destined for you, and why what they tried to steal will return to you in a more complete way. Divine justice does not only punish the wicked, it restores the chosen. And when that happens, everyone will finally understand. They misjudged you from the very beginning. Power, made them forget the voice of truth. In the cold light of lavish rooms, they laughed loudly, believing they had won. They spoke of you as if you were a finished game, a side character erased from the story. They raised their glasses to each other, convinced that everything was already set, that money, connections, and lies would keep them in the place of gods. But they did not understand. True power is never loud. It does not walk with echoing footsteps. It moves like the breath of the wind, silent, gentle, yet strong enough to blow down any castle built from illusion. While they were busy boasting about their false victories, you chose silence. They mistook it for weakness, but your silence was not fear. It was focus, like a wolf sitting at the foot of the mountain, not needing to roar to prove it is the hunter. In that stillness, you learn to hear the sound of your own soul, to know who is true, who is false, who came to test you. Psalm 1-3 says, "The righteous person is like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in season." You are that tree. Every lie they threw at you became another layer of soil over your roots. But instead of dying, you dug deeper, drawing strength from every drop of pain to grow new life. Time is never on the side of the impatient. While they thought they had buried you, they were actually planting the seed of your return. A seed only needs enough darkness to sprout, and you had more than enough of that. Every time they spoke against you, you learned to stand still without explaining. Every time they closed a door, you discovered a hidden path. Every time they turned their backs, you saw who truly stayed. That is how a soul matures, not in applause, but in silence. Those who once celebrated began to notice something strange. They saw you did not collapse, did not react, did not beg. They could not understand how you remained calm under their attacks. And that very calmness kept them awake at night, because they did not know. Your silence was the declaration that they no longer had any power. All their plans, no matter how clever, were nothing but bubbles on the river of God. When the water flows, bubbles vanish. When the wind rises, the surface becomes still again. An old friend once told you, "Do not fear being left behind. Only the chosen must walk through loneliness." You did not believe it then. But now, you understand. Loneliness is not a punishment. It is a doorway. In silence, you heard the call you once ignored. A faint stirring that everything was happening for a purpose greater than you knew. You felt something shift inside you, as if the wind had changed direction, as if the light within you had been touched. And though no one spoke it, you knew justice was coming. They began to crack, not because anyone attacked them, but because there was nowhere left for their souls to hide. When you live too long in lies, the lies become your prison. They lied to keep their power. They lied to cover their emptiness. And one day, they forgot who they were. Meanwhile, you kept standing, kept breathing, kept being real. They began to compare, not out loud, but within. They asked, "Why is that person still at peace? Why do I have everything yet feel afraid?" And that was the beginning of their fall, when the soul starts to question itself. You do not need to do anything. Truth has its own power. Like sunlight, it does not always blaze, but no one can stop it from rising. When the sun rises, darkness disappears. When justice appears, lies fade away. You only need to keep your heart upright, for the justice of God needs no judge. It only needs witnesses. And you, by still standing after everything, are the living proof of that truth. There were nights you looked up at the ceiling and asked, "When will the light come?" But the light had been within you all along. It was only waiting for the moment to be seen. They did not know. Every time they tried to extinguish you, they only made your light burn brighter. For light cannot be hidden by darkness, just as truth cannot be buried forever. Psalm 27:1 echoes in your heart. "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" That verse became your breath, your heartbeat, your invisible shield against every senseless blow. When dawn comes, everything will change color. The names once praised will fade into meaninglessness. The rumors that haunted you will dissolve into the wind, and you, the one once cast down, will become the proof of a victory that needs no noise. They will not understand. They will call it luck. But you know, nothing is coincidence when God intervenes. Everything was already written. And when harvest season comes, what you sowed in tears will bloom in glory. The world still believes in power, but true power always takes the shape of endurance. You are not racing anyone. You are walking in rhythm with your soul. They will watch you, unable to comprehend your peace, and then they will realize you did not win by strategy, you won by faith. That is what they cannot steal. That is what makes every plan, every coin, every lie useless. Justice does not need noise. It comes slowly, but it comes surely. And when it arrives, nothing can stop it. You only need to keep walking. Every road, in the end, leads to the same destination, the place where light can no longer be hidden, where the chosen are no longer mistaken for the weak. When you arrive there, you will understand that everything that once brought you down was only a test of faith. And faith, if it survives the night, becomes power. You do not need to prove it to anyone. You only need to live long enough to see those who once mocked you bow before the truth. And when that moment comes, you will smile, not out of revenge, but because at last, you understand the full meaning of silence. When the wheel of justice begins to turn, it makes no sound. It moves slowly, almost unseen, until the world suddenly awakens to a truth too clear to deny. They no longer laugh as before. The eyes around them begin to shift. The lies once repeated, over and over now, sound like shards of broken glass, reflecting the true faces they tried to hide. No one pushed them down. They stumbled on their own steps that had gone too far, because when you plant deceit, sooner or later, it grows in your own garden. At first, you did not notice. You only felt the air around you begin to change. The people who once turned their backs now struggle to find their way back. The voices that once attacked you have become cautious. Something is happening, but it is not your doing. It is something greater moving through everything. Like a shift in the wind, every lie is lifted and laid bare under the sun. People call it karma, but you know it as the justice of God, and it always arrives on time. Psalm 94-23 reminds us, He will bring back on them their own iniquity. When the truth is revealed, you do not rejoice. There is no satisfaction in your heart, only a strange calm, as if your soul had known all along this moment would come. You realize revenge is no longer needed, because the justice of heaven has already done what you could not, perfectly, precisely, and in a way no human could imitate. Each one who wanted you to fall now bows under the weight of their own consequences. The lies they once fired at, you return like arrows that never missed their mark. Every step they took to pull you down is now a step backward into their own pit. You once asked, do they know they were wrong? But then you understood that is no longer your concern. Some lessons belong only to God to teach, and He teaches through silence. For when He is silent, the truth speaks the loudest. When He does not intervene, it is because He is letting each person face the result of their own choices. They chose darkness, and now they must learn to live within it. As for you, you remain in the light, without defense, without battle, simply keeping your heart straight. People call it luck. They say you were saved, but you know you were not saved. You were kept from bitterness, from the need to prove, from the poison of revenge. That is what makes you different. You do not run, you do not hide, you do not strike back. You simply stand and watch justice move like a song already written. Every note is an act. Every pause is a revelation. That is how divine justice works. Not loud, but never wrong. And then you realize something strange. Those who once hated you were the ones who helped you get closer to your true self. Without them, you would not have learned how to stand alone. Without them, you would not have discovered the strength of forgiveness. Psalm 37-28 whispers, For the Lord loves justice and does not forsake His faithful ones. That verse echoes in your heart as a reminder that everything happens as part of a greater plan. They thought they were breaking you, but they were lifting you higher. You begin to understand silence more deeply. Once, silence was your defense. Now, silence is your power. You no longer need to speak to protect yourself, because truth is already speaking for you. And that silence terrifies them. They want you to react, to be angry, because that would prove they still have control. But you only smile. They do not know that when you choose not to fight, you have already won. They do not know that not reacting is the strongest reaction of all. Justice begins to spread. People start to see the truth. Some who once believed the lies now come to you, not to apologize, but to share your silence. That silence is more beautiful than any explanation. They do not need to say, "I was wrong," because the world has already said it for them. You feel lighter, not because they suffer consequences, but because the weight in your heart has finally fallen away. And in that moment, you understand the true meaning of being chosen, not to defeat your enemies, but to survive without losing your light. If you have ever walked through betrayal, misunderstanding, and isolation, yet still found the strength to rise, then this message is for you. Believe that divine justice is still at work, even when you cannot see it. Share this if your soul feels it is true, because every time we speak truth, the light of justice spreads further. Every time you say, "I am still here," you become a witness to a real miracle. The miracle of a soul that refuses to fall. Psalm 9-7 says, "The Lord reigns forever. He has established his throne for judgment." Justice never disappears. It only waits for the right moment to be seen. And perhaps that moment has come. You no longer need explanations, because the answer lies in your peace. As for them, those who played with truth, they must now live with it. They thought you were the final page, but you are the beginning of what comes next. If this speaks to you, let your heart respond. Let the light within you shine, because the world needs more souls like yours. Those who stay kind in the dark, like, share, or simply leave a single dot, so the universe knows you are still here, still standing, still believing, and still chosen. Arrogance is the rope that tightens around the neck of the one who wears it. When power reaches its peak, they begin to believe they are untouchable. They walk through other people's lives as if moving pieces on a chessboard, pushing, removing, erasing, arranging at will. They no longer see human beings, only opportunities. In their eyes, you are nothing more than a small stone blocking the path that must be cleared. They mock your silence. They laugh at your kindness, convinced that goodness is a mistake. But they do not know, in the world of the soul, every arrogance has its end, and that end comes sooner than they ever expect. Ego is the sweet drug the soul adores. At first, it is only a whisper. You deserve more. Then it grows louder until it shouts, "You are everything." They begin to see themselves through a distorted lens, believing they can manipulate the destiny of others. They crown themselves as gods, create their own laws, and believe that if they speak, the universe will bow. But power does not truly make them strong. It only exposes the weakness of a soul separated from humility in the artificial light of fame. They fail to notice the darkness spreading around them. You see it. Even if you say nothing, you see them begin to slip, not through material failure, but through emptiness. The more they have, the less they feel. The more they control, the more control they lose. A person without limits is one who has cut their own safety line. Psalm 18:27 says, "You save the humble, but bring low those whose eyes are haughty." That verse is like a sharp blade slicing through the fog of illusion. Everything built on pride begins to shake. Not because anyone destroys it, but because its foundation is sand. They do not understand why everything starts to fall apart. Calls go unanswered. The people who once flattered them now stay silent. The doors that once opened are now closed. And when they look for someone to blame, their eyes turn to you, the only one who remains calm. They think you did something, that you know how to strike back. They do not understand. You do not need to do anything. Justice needs no messenger. It only needs time. And when the time comes, it spares no one. Inside them, a nameless fear begins to grow. At first it is suspicion. Is someone watching me? Then restlessness. Why is everything turning against me? Until one day, that fear becomes their true face. They begin to realize they are no longer the hunter, but the hunted. No one has to rise against them, because their own ego already has. It demands, it consumes, and then it burns. And when the fire dies, only the ashes of emptiness remain. You see it all. But this time, you no longer want revenge. You have learned that vengeance does not feed the soul. Forgiveness is the real weapon. Because forgiveness is not to free them, it is to free yourself from the chains of hatred. Forgiveness is the acceptance that divine justice needs no defense. When you let go, you do not become weaker. You simply hand the burden back to heaven. and heaven knows how to handle the rest. One night, you sit alone and think about all that has happened. There is no anger left, only peace. You understand that sometimes God allows darkness to go far, not so it can win, but so people can see their own limits. And when darkness destroys itself, the light does not need to act. Justice does not need to shout. It arrives like a breath, soft, yet unstoppable. They once thought they controlled the story, that they held the pen, and you were only the words to be erased. But when everything collapses, they realize the pen was never theirs. Every line was written to lead them to this moment, the moment of facing themselves. No one escapes the mirror of truth. It does not reflect faces, it reflects souls. And for them, that is the most terrifying sight of all. But you, the one who walked through fire and did not burn, through water and did not drown, you know that true victory is not in their fall, but in your light remaining intact. You have kept your kindness in a world that wanted to harden you. You have chosen love when you had every reason to hate. That is what makes you different. That is why you are chosen. When morning comes, you will see that the justice of God is not a storm that destroys, but a gentle sun that shines after the rain. It does not tear down, it reveals. It does not destroy, it purifies. What needs to fall will fall, what needs to remain will stay. And through it all, you, once seen as weak, will rise calm, strong, and freer than ever before. They once laughed, now they are silent. They once stood above, now they bow their heads. And you, once buried, now walk in the light of a dawn that cannot be stolen. Justice has completed its work, and in the quiet wind, you hear a voice, not from outside, but from within. Keep going. Every trial is only a test for the soul that has been chosen. Light always finds a way through the smallest cracks, and when it comes, nothing can remain hidden. Those who once believed they could control the destiny of others begin to see the light slip into the places they tried to keep dark. They spent years setting traps, crafting plans to keep you from rising. They made alliances, traded favors, nodded to each other in secret meetings full of calculation. But every scheme, no matter how clever, has a blind spot. That blind spot is where the justice of heaven passes through. And when that light shines, there is nowhere left to hide. You do not need to say a word. Time speaks for you. As the truth begins to surface, those who once believed them start to see cracks in their words, contradictions in their actions, shadows behind their smiles. Bit by bit, the masks fall away. You simply stand still, watching as if you already knew how the play would end. In your silence, the world becomes the stage where God draws back the curtain for justice to appear. Psalm 25-14 whispers, "The Lord confides in those who fear him," and that promise is being fulfilled now, quietly but unstoppable. They begin to suffer what they once wished upon others. The traps they built turn against them. Allies become strangers. The hands that once clasped in unity pull away. They try to hold on to power, but power cannot be held if it is not built on truth. You look at them, not in anger, not with satisfaction, but with quiet compassion, because you understand. Every soul must learn through the path it chooses. They chose deceit, and now deceit itself is their teacher, delivering lessons only darkness can teach. While they panic, you grow. You need no recognition, no applause, no proof, because you understand the chosen are not born to be celebrated, but to be refined. Everything they did to bury you became the soil for your growth. They thought they buried, but they planted. They thought they silenced, but they sparked the light. When the lies fall away, only one truth remains. You are still here, and the truth is with you. Their fall does not happen in a single day. It comes slowly, like water seeping through walls, like wind brushing over dry fields, unnoticed until everything collapses. They do not understand why every door closes at once, why those who once praised them now walk away. They believe someone is working against them, but they do not see that it is justice doing its work. No one destroyed them. They destroyed themselves. And they cannot blame anyone because it all began with them. You, the one they once trapped in lies, now walk freer than ever. Every step you take is proof that light cannot be imprisoned. Every breath you take declares that the chosen cannot be erased. When you walk by, the atmosphere shifts. Not because you seek recognition, but because your soul carries the vibration of truth, And truth always makes falsehood tremble. Those who once doubted you now see something in your eyes, a calm they cannot understand, a strength that does not come from man. Sometimes, in quiet moments, you think about it all. Why did they hate you so much? Why did your light bother them? And then you understand. Light always unsettles those not ready to face the truth. They never hated you. They hated the part of you that reflected what they refused to see in themselves. That is why they wanted to silence you. But light cannot be silenced. It only shifts direction. When they try to cover it, it seeps through. When they try to erase it, it reflects. When they try to bury it, it rises from the ground. And that is when you realize that justice is not punishment. It is revelation. When everything is brought into the light, no one needs to speak. Truth stands on its own. They have no more power, because power without truth is only illusion. They have no more reputation, because fame built on lies is sand. And you, the one they targeted, now stand in the light, not as a victor, but as living proof of the promise. Nothing can extinguish the soul that is chosen. That is when you begin to understand divine justice on a deeper level. It does not come to destroy, but to restore order. It does not kill, it renews. It does not steal, it returns. Justice is not a fire that burns, but a light that reveals. When all has been exposed, when the masks have fallen, when the noise fades, you will stand in that silence and realize that everything that once hurt you has become testimony. You did not just survive, you were chosen to stand here as proof that light never loses. And in that moment, you feel a deep peace. Not the loud joy of victory, but quiet gratitude. You know you have walked the full circle of darkness. You understand that everything had its purpose, that every fall was an invitation back to your true self. When you look at the sky, there is no anger left, only thanks. Because without them, you would not know how strong you are. Without the traps, you would not know how precious the straight path to light can be. Psalm 27:1 rises again within you. This time, not as comfort, but as a declaration. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? And you know, justice has completed its work. All that remains is the journey of light, where you no longer need to fight, only to walk. Because once truth has risen, no one can put it out. There are schemes drawn with such precision they seem flawless. They sit around the table, each playing the part of the clever one, planning every step to make sure you have no way out. They call it strategy, but it is really just fear. Fear of being exposed by your light. They cannot stand that you still exist, still breathe, still remain calm in the storm they created. And so they decide, you must be finished, not just discredited, but erased. What they do not know is that when people plot to bring down the chosen, they are writing their own sentence. Because the justice of heaven needs no avenger, it moves on its own, sharp, precise, and never missing its mark. In those days, you could feel it all. The glances full of suspicion, the words heavy with hidden meaning, the silence of those who once called you friend. They spread rumors, twisted the truth, did everything they could to make the world see you as the guilty one. They believed that if enough people turned away, you would have nowhere left to stand. They believed isolation would break you. But what they did not expect is that isolation cannot destroy a chosen soul. It only makes that soul stronger. Every lie they threw was like a stone dropped into water, causing ripples for a moment, but then the surface grew still again, clearer than ever. You did not react, not because you were weak, but because you knew silence is the mirror of truth. In still water, every shadow is revealed. They could not understand why you did not fight back, did not shout, did not defend yourself. Your silence made them restless. They attacked harder, planned deeper, gathered more allies. But the more they tried, the more they exposed themselves. Every lie demanded 10 more to cover it. And when they grew tired, everything collapsed in a single breath. Psalm 7:15 says, "The wicked dig a pit and fall into the hole they have made." You saw how true that is. One of them, who thought they held everything, was suddenly betrayed. Another lost all credibility. The same words they used to destroy you now stood against them in rooms full of watching eyes. No one had to speak. Everyone just looked and understood. They thought they were the hunters, but in the end, they were caught in their own snare. You once heard people say that the justice of God is slow but sure. Now you know it is not slow at all. It simply waits until every heart reveals itself. Justice never rushes to judgment. It lets the guilty sign their own sentence through their actions. And when that moment comes, it gives no warning, no second chance, no escape. That is how the universe turns, quietly, inevitably, without mercy for falsehood. Looking back, there is no anger in you anymore, only clarity. Because now you understand, no one can tear down what God has lifted up. They thought they were winning, but in truth, they were only playing the roles destiny had written for them, the roles of those who create their own downfall. In your silence, you became the mirror in which they saw themselves. And the greatest punishment is not what happens to them, but seeing the soul they can no longer recognize. That night, when everything had quieted, a number appeared in your mind, 111. At first, you did not understand, but something deep inside told you. This was the seal of a new beginning, the sign that an old chapter had closed. 111, the number of awakening, of a doorway opening for the soul that has endured the test. It tells you that nothing that happened was in vain. Every moment was a piece preparing you for what comes next. And if you feel that number resonate within you, it means you too are standing at the threshold of renewal. The justice of heaven does more than sweep away the wrong. It clears the path for what is right to bloom. You begin to see genuine people coming toward you. Doors you thought were shut open from unexpected directions. Everything you lost begins to return. Not as it was, but in a purer form, one that aligns with your soul. They, the ones who mocked you, now look on in fear, because they cannot understand how you are still standing, how their plans have turned against them. They do not know that when you are chosen, you do not play by the world's rules. You walk forward without looking back. The darkness behind you remains, but it no longer frightens you, because you have walked through it and learned that darkness has no power over someone who knows who they are. You are the proof of God's promise that what is destined for you cannot be taken away. And in the soft light of a new morning, you see it clearly now. You were never buried, you were planted. Every trial came not to destroy you, but to prepare you for the next season of light. When divine justice completes its work, it always leaves behind a gift piece. Not the peace that comes from seeing others fall, but the peace that comes from no longer being controlled by fear. You no longer need apologies. You no longer need to prove anything. You simply live, because survival itself is the loudest testimony of truth. And if you look around, you will see that justice is not only happening in your story, but across the world, each soul awakening through its own lessons. Psalm 34-19 says, "The righteous person may have many troubles, but the Lord delivers them from them all." You no longer doubt this, because you are the living proof. And when the wind quiets and light falls over your wounds, you realize you have changed. Not stronger, but calmer. Not harder, but clearer. Because the chosen do not walk to seek revenge. They walk to prove that light, even buried under 1,000 layers of earth, will always rise in its own season, in its own time, and brighter than ever before. Those who once sat on thrones are now left with nothing but the ashes of their illusions. They once believed they were the ones holding the strings, the masters of every destiny. They looked at others as chess pieces, as tools to advance themselves, and thought heaven would stay silent forever. But the justice of God is never silent. It only grows quiet for a time, to let people reveal who they truly are. When truth arrives, those false kings finally realize the thrones they sat on were never built from stone, but from sand. And sand cannot stand when the tide of divine justice rises. You witness this reversal not with joy, but with understanding. Every soul must face what it has created. Those who laughed when you fell now tremble in the wind of their own consequences. They once believed they could control your life, and now they cannot control their own. They once made their own laws, and now must bow before the law of heaven. You do not need to say a word, because time and truth have already spoken. The walls of their power did not fall because you pushed, but because they decayed from within. And you, the one they once cast into the pit, are now climbing step by step toward the light, not through revenge, but through steadfastness. You have nothing to prove. Every step you take, every peaceful breath you draw, is proof that justice is alive. Psalm 37-6 says, "He will make your righteousness shine like the dawn, and your justice like the noonday sun." That light now shines from within you. It is not the light of pride, but of someone who has walked through darkness and kept their heart pure. They look at you and cannot understand. They ask themselves how you can be so calm after everything. They do not know that peace does not come from luck, but from faith. When you walk through battles without letting hate fill your heart, you become something untouchable. And that is what they fear most. They fear you are no longer part of their game. Fear that you have stepped off the board they spent their whole lives building. Because when the chosen step out of the game ends. In that moment, the universe sends you a sign 222. The number appears somewhere, on a clock, on a sign, or in a dream. At first, it seems like coincidence, but then your heart recognizes it. It is not random. 222 is the seal of balance, of harmony between the soul and justice, between humanity and God. It is a reminder that you are not alone, that everything is being aligned perfectly, even if you cannot yet see the whole picture. When this number appears, you feel it within every wound from the past is being healed, and your inner world is finally closing its scars. While you learn to walk slowly, they rush to climb again. But what has fallen cannot be rebuilt on the same ground. They reach for what has slipped away, but justice will not allow it. This time, they must learn humility, and your lesson is trust. Trust that the light knows its way home, that what is right will find its rightful place again. You do not need to rush. You do not need to worry, because when you believe, the universe moves to support that belief. That is the power of the chosen. They do not act from fear, but from a deep knowing that heaven is still watching. You see now that the greatest change was never in the world outside, but within you. Once, you needed justice to prove you were right. Now, you only need peace. Once, you feared loss. Now you understand that nothing truly disappears. It only transforms. What once caused you pain has become your compass. The tears of yesterday were not wasted. They watered your soul, so that now your heart knows how to bloom, even in wounded soil. They, the ones who once stood against you, now see this and fall silent. They may never apologize, but you do not need them to. Forgiveness has never been a deal between two people. It is the liberation of one soul. You forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve freedom. And in that moment, you understand something profound. Justice is not only about punishment, but restoration. God does not wish to see anyone fall. He only wants every soul to find its way back. That night, as you look at the sky, you might see that number again, 222, glowing softly in your mind. A gentle sign that you are on the right path. You feel a presence around you, like a hand resting on your shoulder, firm yet tender. You are no longer afraid. You know that whatever lies ahead, you are not walking alone. And in that breath, you hear the whisper of divine justice. When a soul learns to forgive, the whole universe shifts with it. You smile, not the smile of a victor, but of someone set free, because you finally understand that the purpose of this journey was never to defeat anyone. It was to learn how to rise without fists, to believe without proof, to love without reason. And in that moment, you know who you are, the chosen one, not to conquer, but to illuminate. The justice of God has finished its judgment. What remains now belongs to the light, the part where you are called to walk forward, to become a living witness to an eternal truth, that every honest soul, sooner or later, will be restored to its rightful place under the light. Silence is the most delicate weapon God ever created. When people make noise, He chooses stillness. When the world trembles in chaos, He exhales once, and the wind changes direction. In that silence, all falsehoods reveal themselves, without anyone needing to expose them. That is how divine justice works. Not rushed, not loud, but certain and absolute. You, the one who has walked through the storm, now understand the value of quiet. Because silence is not surrender, it is the strength of those who know the timing of heaven. They, the ones who once believed that noise was the sound of power, cannot bear your calm. They want to see you angry. They need to see you shaken, because that would prove they still control the story. But you no longer live inside their story. You have turned the page to one written only by you and God. While they struggle, you sit in peace. While they shout, you listen. And in that very moment, the universe begins to move in your favor. Your silence is not empty. It is a prayer, an act of faith. You know, some doors only open when you stop knocking. Some miracles only happen when you finally pause. Psalm 46:10 says, "Be still and know that I am God." You had heard that verse before, but only now do you truly understand it. Silence is not just the absence of words. It is the release of control, of fear, of the need to force life to unfold your way. Silence is trusting that justice knows where to go, and you do not need to lead it there. They do not understand, so they thrash harder. They move faster, even as the ground beneath them crumbles. They try to fix lies with new lies, desperate to protect an image while truth eats away at the roots, and you, still as calm as unshaken water. They look at you, and it drives them mad, because nothing terrifies darkness more than someone who is not afraid. In that silence, you become a mirror. They look into you and see their own reflection trembling. One day, you realize that justice no longer lives outside of you. It has become the rhythm of your breath. You no longer need to see anyone punished. You just need to know the universe is in balance. Trees bloom in season, winds shift at the right time, and light always returns after the night. Everything that once broke you has become the ground you now stand on. Old wounds are no longer weaknesses, but marks of a soul refined by fire. You no longer fear the dark, because you know God never takes away the light. He teaches you to see it even without the sun. In stillness, you begin to hear the smallest things. Your heartbeat steady, the whisper of wind through the window, the quiet voice within saying, "Everything is okay." Those words, so simple, are the anthem of souls that have survived their trials. When you can say everything is okay without needing a reason, that is when you know you have won, not over anyone, but over fear, doubt, and the shadow within your heart. You realize darkness was never the enemy. It was only the space where light could define itself more clearly. Without night, you would never know how bright the sun can be. Without betrayal, you would not know the worth of loyalty. Without pain, you would never grasp how deep love truly runs. So everything that has happened now makes sense. Justice is not just judgment, it is healing. It does not come to make you afraid, it comes to set you free. And then, in that quiet moment, you feel something unexpected: gratitude. Gratitude even for those who hurt you, because through them, you discovered courage. Gratitude for sleepless nights, because they taught you how to pray. Gratitude for every loss, because they taught you how to cherish what remains. Forgiveness is no longer something you try to do. It becomes the air you breathe. You forgive not with your mind, but with your peace. And in that moment, you know you have stepped fully into the realm of light. A small sign appears. Not a number, not a miracle outside you, but a feeling of serenity inside your chest. You understand this is where justice ends and grace begins. The outer world may still be noisy, but within you, there is stillness. You no longer need to search for light, because you have become it. And when night falls, you close your eyes, no longer praying, "Lord, save me from them." Instead, you whisper, "Thank you for letting me see myself." That is the prayer of a soul that is matured. That is the moment God smiles. For He knows the chosen one has finally learned his greatest lesson: not to fight to prove, but to stay silent and shine. Not every collapse is slow. Some empires vanish in a single breath, like wind sweeping through a castle of sand. When the justice of God arrives, it gives no warning, no sign, no sound. It strikes like lightning on a clear day, so sudden that no one can speak a word. They, the ones who once stood on top, believed they were untouchable. They thought time was their ally, that because nothing had happened yet, nothing ever would. But the laws of the soul never forget. Everything built on deceit must one day fall. And when that hour comes, nothing can stop it. They call it an accident, bad luck, misfortune. But you know better. Nothing is random. Every detail has been perfectly arranged. One careless word, one small decision, one fractured alliance, all coming together in a chain reaction. The empire they built was already cracking from its foundation. They simply refused to see it. When truth finally erupted, there was no way to hide. Those who once praised them turned away. The stages that once lifted them up became their courts of judgment, and they, once rulers, became prisoners of their own story. You do not celebrate. You do not laugh. You simply stand there quietly, like someone who already knew the ending of the play. Because deep down you understand this had to happen, not out of hatred, but out of balance. Not for destruction, but for correction. What is happening to them now was never done to them. It was chosen by them. Every lie is like a rope tightening around the neck. The longer it stretches, the tighter it becomes. And while they thought they were in control, the rope had already closed in, with no escape. While they scramble to save what's left, you quietly walk out of that shadowed place. The noise behind you fades into echoes. You do not look back, because justice has already closed that chapter. Ahead of you lies a new path, the path of peace, of light, where the fears that once haunted you have lost their power. One morning, you look at the clock and see the number 999 repeating. This time, you know what it means. 999 is the seal of completion. It marks the end of an old cycle and opens the door to a new beginning. When it appears, it means every lesson has been learned and you are ready for the next chapter. You smile. Not the proud smile of triumph, but the calm smile of understanding. Everything that once caused you pain is now just a distant memory. You no longer need to prove you are right, because truth has proven itself. You no longer need anyone to apologize, because every wrong has already revealed itself. You no longer need revenge, because justice has delivered it in a way more elegant than you could ever imagine. Psalm 125:1 echoes within you. Those who trust in the Lord are like Mount Zion, which cannot be shaken. And you understand you are that mountain. Nothing can move a soul standing on the rock of truth. You begin to feel the power of silence more deeply than ever. Each breath becomes a prayer of gratitude. Each step, a hymn of peace. The world around you seems slower, not because it changed, but because you did. You no longer look at others' downfall with judgment, but with compassion, because now you know everything is part of a greater plan. Justice does not come to end things, it comes to awaken them. For them, collapse is punishment. For you, collapse is rebirth. In that stillness, your soul expands. You are no longer just a survivor, you are a witness. Through your own journey, you carry the message of light to those still walking through the night. You tell them that no darkness is forever, no lie lasts forever. Divine justice may seem delayed, but when it comes, it strikes like lightning. And light, once it shines, never retreats. You are not sure when you became different. Perhaps it was the moment you stopped resisting, or the moment you chose to forgive. But now, everything is clear. What once were wounds have turned to light. What once were losses have become blessings. What once were endings have become beginnings. The number 999 hums like a melody within your spirit, closing the old, opening the new, for a soul that has been refined by the journey. You look back one last time. No anger, no regret, only gratitude. Gratitude for the darkness, because without it, you would never have known the strength of your own light. Gratitude for justice, because without it, the world would lose its balance. Gratitude for the journey itself, because every turn, every fall, every tear has brought you here to a heart as calm as a river that no longer needs to fight its waves. Now, you understand why the chosen must always walk through darkness before stepping into dawn. It is not punishment, it is preparation. Light is never given to those who have not known the night. And the justice of God does not come to make you proud, but to teach you humility and victory. When you realize this, you stop waiting, because you are already living inside that justice. It is no longer something ahead of you. It is alive in every beat of your heart. You close your eyes and whisper, "I understand." And in that moment, the wind stills, the air softens, as if the universe itself nods in agreement. Because you have reached the end of darkness, and now you step into the most beautiful part of the light, where justice, faith, and peace become one. When justice finishes its work, what remains is not ruin, but peace. The world falls silent, not out of fear, but because everything has finally returned to its rightful place. Those who once chased power now sit in the shadows of their own making, with no applause, no one calling their name. They have lost not only their freedom, but their souls. For the real prison has no walls. It lives in the mind, where regret whispers each night, and silence becomes an unending sentence. And you, once cornered and forgotten, now walk in the light, needing no proof, no victory to display. Your very presence is the evidence. of divine grace. You hear people say they were caught, exposed, stripped of their titles, but you do not rejoice. You simply exhale in quiet relief, as if the universe itself has restored its balance. You know this is not blind punishment, but revelation, sharp and precise. Psalm 27:1 rises within you. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? That verse is no longer a plea, but a declaration. Because now you understand, light does not come to burn, but to reveal. And when all is revealed, there is nothing left to fear. The justice of God never strikes blindly. It is like the blade of a surgeon, cutting exactly where it must, separating decay from what can still be healed. Those who lived by lies are stripped bare, not to be humiliated, but to finally see themselves clearly. And those who remained honest, though once oppressed, are now lifted up. Nothing that happens is random. The universe always moves toward balance. Once darkness is removed, light spreads quickly, warm and deep, like the sun after a storm shining over soaked but living ground. You look back on your journey and understand that without the long night, you would never have known how beautiful dawn could be. Without betrayal, you would never have known the worth of truth. Without the breaking, you would never have known what it means to be rebuilt by the hand of God. Everything that once hurt you has become light, illuminating the path you've walked. You no longer feel anger, fear, or regret. You feel gratitude. They, the ones who once tried to destroy you, are now trapped not by walls but by their own minds. Regret knocks on the door that never stops echoing. Each memory is a blade reminding them of what they have done. No one judges them because they have become their own judge. That is the true sentence, one without end. Meanwhile, you walk lightly, each step a song of freedom. For freedom does not come from escaping a physical prison, but from releasing hatred within the heart. You remember the nights you once knelt and asked, "When will you act, Lord?" Now you know He always was, just not in ways you could see. Every silence, every delay was part of the plan. Justice never forgets anyone. It only waits for the right time to be revealed. And when it comes, you no longer need to fight. You simply stand, like light itself, not judging, not resenting, only shining. One morning, as the sun rises, you stand by the window and breathe deeply. The air feels different. No heaviness, no worry, only a warm stillness. Inside you, a quiet sense of renewal spreads, as if everything is beginning again. But this time, you are not starting in darkness. You are starting in light. And this light does not come from outside, but from within. You no longer need to search for God, because He is in your breath, in your heartbeat, in the way you now smile at life. You know the journey is not over, but you no longer fear the road ahead, because justice has cleared the way, and light will lead you forward. You carry everything you have learned: kindness, steadiness, and faith, not to fight, but to guide those still walking where you once were. Those who still believe darkness is forever. You will tell them your story, not to be admired, but to remind them that every soul can be restored. You know someone is listening, those who have weathered their own storms, those waiting for a sign that justice still exists. And you whisper, believe. The justice of heaven is never late. It is only waiting for you to believe in the light within yourself. As you speak those words, a gentle breeze passes through, carrying the warmth of a new dawn. In that light, you are no longer the wounded one, but the one sent forth, chosen to remind the world that light always wins. The world may change, people may betray, but the justice of God never errs. And when all is quiet again, only one truth remains in your heart, the truth your soul has known from the beginning. The chosen do not fall, they rise. Grateful that you chose to spend these moments in the light of this story. If it touched your soul, please like, share, and subscribe, and ring the bell so the next whisper of light may find its way back to you.